This presentation is a critical appraisal of a cohort study with the use of the McMaster Quantitative Studies Critical Appraisal tool. The contributors of this presentation are myself, Vashti, Katie, Bonnie, Hannah, Grace, and Caitlin. The article chosen is Modified Team-Based and Blended Learning Perception, a cohort study among medical students in King Saud University. This study by Albarack and others was published by the BMC Medical Education Journal in 2021. The abstract has clearly outlined the methods, results, and conclusions drawn from this study. The method used was a survey distributed to 821 medical students in the years 2017, 18, and 19. From this, 701 medical students participated and responded to the survey. The abstract has also incorporated information regarding the aim and objective of this study, which was to assess student perceptions of blended learning and modified team-based learning within the King Saud University. The McMaster Critical Appraisal tool has been chosen because it provides a thorough and systematic evaluation of the article, and it effectively breaks down each component of the article with significant detail. It allows the contributors of this presentation to identify the article's strengths and limitations within areas such as the purpose, study design, data collection, and data analysis methods.
The background literature was reviewed with reference to the McMaster Quantitative Studies Critical Appraisal tool. From the literature provided, the effectiveness of blended learning and modified team-based learning is well described and supported by evidence. The theme of blended learning being more beneficial than both traditional lecturing on its own and e-learning on its own was established and supported by appropriate references. The purpose of the study is clearly identified and the references used were relatively current, though there was minimal discussion of the clinical importance of the study. No gaps were identified in the research, and there was no inclusion of literature that investigates the theme of student perceptions on blended learning.
The study design used for this research article was an observational analytical cohort study. Using the McMaster Quantitative Studies Critical Review form, it was determined that an analytical observational cohort study was the most appropriate design for this study because it allowed for multiple outcomes to be examined at the same time, thus allowing conclusions to be drawn about students' perception of the exposure of different learning techniques, which was the main objective of the study. Strengths of observational analytical cohort studies include the ability to establish temporality without using experimental methods. At the start of the study, all subjects have or have not had the exposure, in this case modified team-based and blended learning, and the outcome, the perception of the quality of learning from students develops later, making it certain that the exposure preceded the outcome, establishing temporality and possible causality. Another benefit to cohort studies is that several exposures, in this case different learning formats, can be studied simultaneously. Limitations to cohort studies include the need for a large sample size in order to draw conclusions, which can be difficult to find, as well as a possibility for confounding factors influencing the outcome. There is some potential for selection bias in the study, which affects the validity of the results and conclusion made from these results. It was stated that out of 821 students over the 3 years, 701 students chose to respond. This means that volunteer bias may have been present, meaning that the students who decided to take part in the study may have been unique compared to those who chose not to participate. This means that the participants representing may have provided more favourable responses to one type of learning and may not have been an accurate representation of the views of the cohort as a whole, decreasing the study's results' validity.
The participants in Albarack and colleagues' study consisted of third-year medical students at the College of Medicine at King Saud University. These students were made up from cohorts from 2017, 2018 and 2019. The study focused on students enrolled in the Medical Informatics course. Of the 821 students enrolled in the class over the 3-year period, 701 participated in the study. 69.5% of the students were male, 30.5% were female, and the highest number of participants came from the 2019 cohort with 40.7%. There was not explicit mention of exclusion or inclusion criteria other than the participants being enrolled in the Medical Informatics course. A sampling method was not specified. Albarack and colleagues informed the students of the aim of the study, and consent was recorded during the commencement of the study. Departmental and scientific approval was gained from the Institutional Review Board, Health Science College's Research on Human Subjects, Research Centre, and the Deanship of Scientific Research of King Saud University.
As acknowledged, 701 third-year medical students responded to the surveys, which were self-administered questionnaires. These surveys consisted of 27 questions, which were categorized into the two main concepts regarding student perceptions of various blended learning techniques. There were 22 questions with the blended learning approach and the students' experiences with these. Then there were 3 questions on modified team-based learning outcomes, and the final 2 questions were stated as general. This demonstrates that the article has made use of an effective measuring technique in which all students were exposed to the same questions within the survey. There is possible participant bias occurring where the participants may have answered the survey questions based on what they believe the researchers are looking for. This means that the questions may have been stated in a way that is biased and prompts a certain idea or answer. Other exposure bias possibly occurring is within measurement error, where the validity of the survey is unknown. The chosen CAT was explicitly used in order to appraise the article's exposure and any possible bias surrounding this. We can acknowledge that co-intervention was avoided and the intervention procedures were clearly outlined. This was that the students participating in the surveys were exposed to questions based around team-based and blended learning.
The study did not provide a clear hypothesis, nor provide a clear research question. Without the presence of a hypothesis or research question, no outcome measure is addressed. However, we know the study's main objective was to assess students' perceptions towards blended and modified team-based learning at the College of Medicine in KSU. The study was achieved by distributing a survey to medical students in those 3 consecutive years. Results from the survey produced clear indications of what percentage of students preferred particular types of learning, enabling the study to draw sufficient conclusions. The study was highly successful in finding results and producing quantitative data, proving to have a positive outcome. However, without a clear hypothesis, it is uncertain what outcome was predicted or desired. The study, although proving successful, lacked an outcome and measure.
Data analysis began with exporting the information from iClicker to Excel for it to then be imported into statistical package for social science. Descriptive statistics were used in analysis to report averages, standard deviations, percentages, as well as the students' perspective. Analysing the differences between gender was done by an independent sample t-test, while the statistical differences between year groups was done by using an analysis of variance. For all tests, statistical significance was set at 0.05. The authors did not clearly justify the use of their chosen analysis methods, however I do believe both the t-test and ANOVA are relevant.
A particular research article stated a brief ethics statement paragraph that listed information concerning what the participants were informed of and its approvals. Within this paragraph, it is mentioned that the participants were informed about the aim of the study and consent was given at the beginning of the study. Although this covers the broad ethical guidelines within a cohort study, it would benefit the article to state more detailed coverage concerning what the participants consented to. For example, was it anonymous, and where this information was kept over the duration of 3 years.
Summative scales were used to report results regarding what elements of modified team-based learning students found helpful, as well as their views on 5 separate Blackboard features. Table 2 outlines the observations of the study surrounding the students' agreeability towards modified team-based learning elements. The 2 most agreed upon were the usefulness of oral and written feedback from the instructors, followed by their learning was facilitated by working in a group for tutorials. The 2 most disagreed upon elements were weekly tutorials were a helpful learning activity and workshops were a helpful learning activity. Table 3 shows the students' experience and use of Blackboard. The most common activity on Blackboard was the receiving and checking of grades via Grade Center, and the least utilised was observed to be accessing the library via Blackboard. Table 4 shows a breakdown of the 5 elements of Blackboard for each year group. There is agreement between years 2017 and 2019 that online quizzes are the most useful tool, closely followed by Grade Center, while the 2018 cohort reported Grade Center to be the most useful. Analysis of gender differences via independent sample t-test showed a significant difference between male and female students. Males had significantly higher means in a number of areas, such as finding workshops helpful, while females had significantly higher means for checking and receiving grades via Grade Center.
A summary of all elements that showed significant difference between genders can be seen in Table 5. Table 6 shows the areas where a significant difference was observed between years 2017, 18 and 19. This significant difference was found for 15 out of 22 items.
Using the McMaster critical reviews form for quantitative studies, evaluation of the conclusions drawn from the study were determined. The findings from the study drew several strong conclusions about students' perceptions towards blended and modified team-based learning. The study found that the students showed a positive attitude towards flipped classroom learning and found workshop and tutorials effective in learning, as well as high academic achievement when this technique was introduced. Students also reported that working in groups facilitated the learning process. The current study results also showed that the students preferred blended learning activities to modified team-based learning because they preferred face-to-face elements with online activities. The study found that a significant difference between the learning of males and females, with males showing a more positive attitude towards oral explanations for understanding, tutorial and work trips as helpful learning activities, working in groups, preparing reports and other group activities. The implications for practice in a teaching context were not explicitly discussed in the study, and due to the specific criteria for participants, third-year medical students in the year 2017, 18 and 19, respectively, at the College of Medicine at King Saud University in Riddle, Saudi Arabia, the external validity of the study is decreased. This means the findings from the article cannot be applied by educators to students who did not meet the participation criteria and is considered to be a significant limitation to the study. The findings from this study could instead be used to form future research about these different learning techniques and begin the process of developing research which is relevant in a teaching environment. Another limitation of this study is the potential for presence of confounding. It is difficult to determine other factors such as personal life factors, mental health, and lifestyles of students across the three cohorts which may have influenced their perception toward these learning approaches. This was not stated as a limitation by the authors and is an important factor to consider when trying to maintain validity and reliability of the findings of the study. One strength of this study included the large sample size of participants, with 701 students over 3 years, which increases the internal validity of the findings from the study. Additionally, the study was able to provide in-depth results about the students' performance, engagement, and feelings towards a range of learning techniques and classroom setups, which provides a broad range of information which is useful for future researchers investigating similar topics. The strengths and limitations identified by the authors were not explicitly discussed in the study, with the only implied limitation being the readiness assurance testing process, which were not administered to students due to time constraints and size of the cohort.
When analysing a research article, in particular a cohort study, it is essential to select a critical appraisal tool adequate enough to assist in the breakdown of the data. As mentioned, the critical appraisal tool used to deconstruct and analyse the selected cohort study was the McMaster quantitative. This particular appraisal tool assisted in the analysis of the quantitative data stated throughout the article. The McMaster quantitative had a major impact throughout this critical appraisal and influenced sections within the report, including methodology, results, discussion, and conclusion.
When using the McMaster quantitative to analyse the article, there was an overall consensus that the tool was effective and easy to use. Notable strengths of the CAT across various areas of the study include its clear indications of what information was required to appraise the study sample. Prompts and guidelines were highly appropriate in determining whether the study design was appropriate in this study. The CAT provided appropriate reference of what information was relevant and necessary. This then aided in identifying what wasn't included in the study. Finally, the CAT's guidelines were helpful in determining whether strong conclusions could be made about the results from the study and whether this could be applied in a clinical context.
With a simple structured layout providing users with prompts and guidelines, no major limitations can be noted. Overall, the McMaster Quantitative Studies Critical Appraisal Tool was highly effective in evaluating the article in all sections of the study. With this, it comes to the conclusion of our critical appraisal. Thank you for listening.